You guys, I went from ripping out all my plants to it looking like the garden you see behind me in less than 2 months. Hey, and welcome back to Mini Urban Farm, a channel about gardening and homesteading in the suburbs. Now, I usually do monthly garden tours, right? If you follow along, you know that I did my April garden tour, my March garden tour, February, and so on. Now, today is not going to be a full garden tour, right? Because I am saving that for May, but I did want to give you guys like a mini garden tour, and mostly because the last time I did a garden tour in April, there were a lot of things that had not germinated yet, right? A lot of things had not popped up through the soil, but fast forward a couple weeks and things are growing, right? And they are growing fast. So I didn't want to wait until May because they are going to be much bigger. So it'll have just been like 0 to 60 in under a month. I wanted to give you guys the in-between, right? Because I am so excited to see these new little seeds pop their head up. And I know that if you're a gardener, you also like to see that. So in today's video, it will just be a quick run through of everything new that has happened in the garden. You know, I'm not going to bore you guys with the same stuff that hasn't, really grown that much, but I'm going to show you what popped its head up, what things are growing fast, a few new changes and challenges that I've had to deal with this month in the garden, and even some of the fruit trees that have been making a lot of progress. So let's go. Alright, so the first thing I want to show you guys is actually the zucchini. This has been doing really well, actually. We actually have some giant fruit here. And then we have a yellow squash plant with actual yellow squash on it. I was really excited. And then we have another zucchini over here. I have actually been coming in here and hand pollinating when I see, when I see some of the female flowers in here. I will try to hand pollinate as much as possible, just to ensure that I actually get a good crop. It's one of the things I do in the mornings when I come out here, if I see any. One big challenge that we've had in the garden is actually this stuff right here. So this is diatomaceous earth, and we actually had a big problem with ants in this bed. So there was a massive ant pile from here all the way across and all the way here, and actually in the rocks as well. So I have been pouring boiling water in here and some of the other raised beds that actually had some ants as well, and then adding in the powder diatomaceous earth just to try and get rid of some of that. Now, I am from South Florida originally, so I'm no stranger to ants, especially fire ants, right? However, I have never had an entire colony of ants move themselves into one of my raised beds, and it's not just that bed. The bed where I have my cucumbers growing, they also have quite a few ants in them, although I'm trying to stop it in advance. Now, I found this out the hard way. I happen to be allergic to red ants, and so when I went to, take something out of the garden, or I don't remember what I was doing, but I went to lean over and I was resting myself against one of the sides of the raised bed, and through the little slots of the raised beds was a whole bunch of ants that just made themselves comfortable on my body, and my entire right side has been covered in ant bites. And of course that swells if you're allergic to it. So as many benefits as ants can potentially have in the garden, like helping to pollinate some of your flowers, I really cannot have fire ants, especially in the garden, because it is such a health risk to myself. So we have been trying to get these ants out of here. I have put some diatomaceous earth, we've used some boiling water, but essentially that's been the biggest challenge in the garden so far this month. You can also see that my Cherokee wax beans have grown quite a bit since I planted them out just a few weeks ago, actually. Now, these ones that I planted out here were from one seed pack, and then these ones over on this side were from a different seed pack that I think I bought from the store or something, because I ran out on this side. You can see though that these ones are significantly bigger than this side. These ones, while they did germinate, they just took a little bit longer to germinate, which is why they're not as big right now, but I'm sure that they'll continue to grow and catch up. It's just interesting how, I planted them out the exact same day, and you can tell the seeds, I think, were probably a little bit older on this side, and they didn't do as well. I also have my chives popping up, and I think you can probably see that it's like tiny little pieces, tiny little green things popping up here, but those actually popped up when we got a lot of rain. I can feel them all. I don't think you can see it on camera, but there's a whole bunch of them growing in there. One of the things I'm actually most excited about is my loofah. Now, I have never grown loofah before. I think the last time that I did a garden tour, these had not popped their head up yet, but we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 loofahs right here. I think that this is just the way that they grow with this like white
stuff on the leaves, because all of them have it. If you have any idea about growing loofah, let me know, because I'm not really sure what it's supposed to look like, but so far they seem like they are doing really, really well. In this same bed, my arugula has been growing like crazy. I actually haven't been using too much arugula yet so far, but as you can see, I do need to come in here and harvest some of these leaves. We use them for breakfast with eggs and a lot of salad. The same thing with the kale. On the other side over there, my raised bed, the first one down that way, has a whole bunch of kale growing in it. And then these are actually Marvel of Venice pole beans. Now these are trellising and trying to reach something before they topple over. What I've been doing is I've just been coming in here and pushing them in through and back out, so kind of just like weaving them. So when this one gets long enough that it actually reaches that side without pulling it too much, then I'll go ahead and do the same thing and just kind of like weave them in and out, so that then all of these will be growing this way and up onto that trellis. Just like we've done with these little cucamelons. As you can see, these are doing really, really well. I have grown cucumbers in the past. I've never grown cucamelons or mouse cucumbers, or I think they're actually called Mexican sour gherkins, I think is what they're called. So these are doing really, really well, and I've just taken the tendrils, like if they're growing the opposite direction, I just kind of do the same thing and weave them out, weave them in through the trellis, but they seem like they are doing it pretty well on their own as well. You can see they have just been trellising themselves all the way up, and then today I noticed that they actually reached the top and they are starting to curve on this side and trellis themselves that way. So I'm really excited about that. We have some on the other side that is doing the exact same thing. Now our cayenne peppers are doing pretty well. They have actually a few little flowers on them. I have 6 plants in this bed here. This one has some flowers, this one has some little buds, and this one has this big white flower right there. So I'm excited to see if I can try to grow peppers this year, and hopefully it works. Now we do have this little thing growing here. I'm not exactly sure what that is. That might very well be a weed. I really have no idea. But I'm going to leave it there to see what happens. I'm a big fan of letting volunteer plants grow. So, you know, if it turns into something great, if it happens to be a weed, then I will just pull it and let it go. Now one of my cucumber plants, I have 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. This one here died, so you can see I came back and just planted out. I direct sowed a few more cucumbers just to see, you know, I didn't really account for the fact that these are much smaller plants than regular cucumbers, so they could probably fit a lot more in one space, but as you can see, they do grow and grow and grow and grow, so I'm not sure. I might end up, you know, maybe thinning out 1 or 2 of these and leaving the other ones. Back here in this corner, and again, I'm going to try not to get too close, you can see we do have this little ant infestation here. So I put some diatomaceous earth on that to hopefully get rid of those without having to touch them too much. Now my basil over here has been doing extraordinarily well. I have been trying to leave it alone as much as possible because I love growing basil, and I have grown basil several years in a row now. However, last year I came through and I fertilized the heck out of it and it all died. So I'm trying to let it just do its own thing. These are doing really well, and I might end up thinning these a little bit just because I would like to have like really nice bushy basil plants. What I usually do, and what I've actually been doing, is there was a good concentration of them like right here, because that is where the wind took them and spread them. I did originally spread them more evenly, or so I thought, but they ended up like all in this one corner and then a few in that corner. So that area back there is kind of empty, and this area here was a little bit more empty. What I have been doing is just taking the plants out, right? So like the little ones in between, these are significantly too close together. I would just take these, pop them out, and then transplant them over here. I did that with this one, and I did that with this one as well. And so far the roots seems like they're taking off pretty well. We do have a whole bunch more germinating, as you can see, and back there as well. I do have this other basil plant, which is, you know, a survivor from last season and the season prior. Now it actually has been drying out. I don't know if you can see this here, but the stem actually, you know, they produce flowers just like the ones right here. They produce flowers, and if you cut them off, right, if you cut the whole flower off, then the plant will continue to grow. But what I like to do actually is to let them go to seed. Once these flowers dry out, then you can actually harvest all of these seeds and plant them back into your garden. So as you can see here, I let them dry out, and then last week or 2 weeks ago, I think it was, I just took everything that was here and I crushed them and scattered them back into the other area with the basil. So that is why we have these tiny little basils popping up now. Again, after these have already been established. It's because I just keep spreading more and more in here as I get extras. Alright, so if you remember from the last garden tour, I have my orange peach tomatoes. They're actually doing really well, and I am getting a lot of little flowers. My grape tomatoes on the other side there in that box, they already have a few little baby tomatoes on them. These ones don't have anything yet, they're just mostly flowers. I do still need to come and create a trellis around this, and I promise I will make a video on that because I have been getting a few requests on how I build my trellises. These are very, very sturdy trellises, and I've been using them for a little while now, so I will make a video on that as I build out this trellis and the one behind me as well. But these are my little volunteer parsley plants, right? So last season I had my parsley here. It was like this big mound of parsley that I would just harvest from nonstop, and so when I ripped everything out, even though it was doing quite well, I just ripped out all my parsley. Now a lot of it, even though I did rip it out, it decided it was just gonna continue growing and growing. And after I planted out my tomatoes, I just noticed that I had all these little baby parsleys, right? So this is curled parsley, and that is Italian flat leaf parsley. I just left them, right? Because not only does it act like a ground cover, right, like a live mulch, it just, you know, provides me with more parsley. So I just left it, and it is pretty much just taking over. I have been using this one quite a bit, and because the other parsley I planted out is not really, you know, up to speed yet, but I mean, as far as it goes, I'm just gonna leave this here and just continue making herb bombs. Alright, and as I mentioned before, all of this kale has grown in the past month. This was pretty much like tiny little baby kale, and it grows really fast. I have my, I think those are potted pink potted pole beans, something like that on this one side, and zebra pole beans on the other side, or vice versa. I can't remember which is which. These ones seem to be growing much slower than the other ones, right? You can see that these ones are already starting to trellis up the side there while the other ones have not. I did actually get to leave my little baby volunteer kale. So I was actually thinking that Alan would have come in here and ripped it up. Now he hasn't come out into the garden quite a bit, mostly because it's been quite hot outside and I'm really the one who does all the gardening, but he hasn't mentioned it yet, so I'm just gonna keep harvesting my kale. Hopefully this will grow. I think it's like 4 or 5 plants in here of kale, so I'm just gonna leave it out. I mean, it's in the middle of the walkway, as you can see, but you know, it's not really hurting anything, and eventually, you know, I will end up ripping it up. But I mean, look at all this kale, and I really feel bad just ripping up something that's growing so well. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is my rosemary. Now I have these two pretty big rosemary plants, one on that side and one over here on the other side of the garden. Now these are pretty massive. I planted these out at the beginning of last season, so around, I think it was like August or September of last year, and they have done extraordinarily well. They were just tiny little transplants. I actually propagated them from a previous rosemary plant I had, but they have just grown incredibly. I mean, some of these stalks are like massive already, and I use this on a daily basis, right? So every day I come in here and I just cut off, I don't really cut from the top as much. I try to cut from the bottom, because when these plants grow, I don't want this to just be like overrun. And the tomatoes, especially over here, they do tend to get pretty close, so I go around the edge and I kind of like try to train it upwards, so that they get taller instead of going out sideways. But overall, I really don't water these all that much. These are just, you know, great herbs to plant that you don't have to really take care of all that much. I think when it rains is pretty much the only time it gets watered, and if I'm out here with the hose or anything, which I don't really do anymore because I have a drip irrigation system in place, whenever, you know, I am with the hose, then maybe I'll just spray some water on these two. But other than that, they are growing extremely well. One thing I will recommend if you're gonna plant rosemary, definitely when it starts warming up, like in the spring, take some cuttings from it, because when you take cuttings from it, you get a lot more new growth, right? So the new growth is really stimulated by taking cuttings and encouraging the plant to grow more. Another major thing I really want to talk about, because I'm really excited about it, is these fig trees. So these fig trees, I think we bought like maybe 2 months ago. You can see there's like these little, I think that's like a fruit starting actually. And you have a whole bunch of new leaves. Now, when it was getting really cold outside, I think we bought them like in January or February, and so it was getting really cold outside, and this one especially had lost a whole bunch of leaves, and I wasn't sure if it was going to survive. At one point it actually had no leaves on it and no new green growth, but this one has come back quite well, and now it's actually growing a bunch of new baby leaves. So I'm really excited for that. And if you watched our homesteading goals video that I did at the beginning of the year, I think it was like the middle of January, I laid out a whole bunch of homesteading goals, farming goals that I wanted for Mini Urban Farm. One of those goals was to actually grow a food forest, right? So we are in the process of working on our food forest. If you don't know what a food forest is, basically it is a forest, for lack of a better word. It's just an area of land where there's natural growth, right? So you don't really have to garden it every single day. You might not even have irrigation on it. You can, implement swales and other natural watering systems so that it just grows as a natural ecosystem. And there's mostly fruit trees or nut trees. You have the canopy layer, and then you have different layers in between, right? So the taller fruit trees, then the smaller fruit trees, and you have vines and root crops and ground covers, and it acts like a natural ecosystem. Of course, you have to have some space for this if you want to actually make an ecosystem. You can do it with just 1 or 2 fruit trees and a little, mini ecosystem underneath it. However, we are going to be planting out a 7,000 square foot food forest. Obviously not on this property. There is not enough space to do this, nor are we allowed to with the suburban HOA regulations. However, we did buy a piece of land at the end of last year, which is where our chickens are. If you haven't seen our chicken videos, the garden incorporates into the chickens and vice versa really, really well. So I have an entire chicken playlist if you'd like to check that out. But as far as the food forest goes, we have been clearing out the land as much as possible. We did hire somebody to clear out the majority of the brush. It was basically like a Florida forest, right? You have a whole bunch of pine trees and then a whole bunch of like palmetto bushes and all of these other natural bush type things, which are great, but they're really not conducive to growing food. So we had somebody clear that out. Eventually that will be where our dream home goes, and the garden and all of the other stuff for a bigger mini urban farm. But in the meantime, we are going to plant out our fruit trees. So we have these 2 fig trees I just showed you. We have a guanabana tree, which I planted from seed. If you're not familiar with that fruit, it's actually soursop. You can make like smoothies out of it and things like that. So I really like that fruit. It's a very tropical fruit and it does grow here. So I'm really excited to plant that out. And I also have an orange tree that we bought, I think it was last month. So I have an entire list of fruit trees that I am going to be planting out there, starting with these ones here. So that is on our list, but we are going to need to get these in the ground as soon as possible. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of new growth, and they lost a lot of leaves because they're not really in the size pot that they're supposed to be in order to sustain them, right? So I don't want to have to keep watering them on a daily basis. Figs do need a lot of water for right now when they are, in this little container, but the goal is that eventually, we won't need to water any of these fruit trees because we will have the natural systems in place in the food forest. So that is our next step. On the weekends, we go out and clear out, 1 or 2 additional trees. We're trying to leave as much as possible of the pine trees and the natural beauty, but still actually be able to plant out our fruit trees. So I will probably be making additional videos on that process because, I know that this community, while it is centric around gardening, there are a lot of people, myself included, that want to have a natural environment that, you don't have to take care of as much, but produce actual fruits, right? I don't grow a lot of fruits in here. I've grown ground cherries. You can grow things in pots, but I'd really like to have an actual, forest where I can go in and pick my fruits. All right, so that wraps up our mini urban farm, mini garden tour. I hope you guys enjoyed. I have really enjoyed seeing all the new growth in the garden. There are so many things popping up and I didn't want to miss it. I wanted to show you guys as the things grow and pop their heads up, instead of just showing you, nothing being here and then all of a sudden there are these massive plants. If you garden on a regular basis, you know that it can be a very trying experience if you're not a patient person. I am definitely not a patient person, so seeing all this new growth so fast really gets me motivated to continue gardening. I hope that it was helpful for you to see, and if you like this video, please like and subscribe for more urban gardening, urban homesteading, chicken videos, all of that good stuff, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks.